Hey everyone, how you going? It's a while since I've done any live video, so let's see if I can get away with this without disturbing and upsetting the dogs. How have we been? I've been a bit overwhelmed, I guess, in a lot of ways, so I've been a bit busy. What I want to do today is I'm actually going to do this in a series of 3 steps because I have 3 10 a.m. slots lined up, and this one's going to be really late. I'm just going to adjust the camera. Yes, I'm running terribly late, already 2 hours late, so it's going to be mid-afternoon by the time I get this up. But what I want to do over the next 3 slots is show you embellishing a bag, and I'm using one of the Astra and Ann large totes, which I'll go through in a second, with scraps and bits and pieces. Now, anyone who's familiar with any of my work will know I use a lot of textural fabrics, so velvets and silks and all sorts of different things. And some of you may be aware that my mother, who's the world's biggest hoarder, has literally got, and I mean literally, it is one shipping container, a whole shipping container full of fabric and craft and all sorts of stuff. You might see here some of her linens that I need to price up and get out. Anyway, she's going through chemo for stage 4 cancer at the moment, and the prognosis is not that great, but that's no worse than many of you have gone through, and I'm not whinging about that. The reason I told you that is because this shipping container is full of stuff and she's asked me to move a lot of it on. So I'm trying different techniques and different approaches. Some of it's on my website, some of it I do in my live sales, some of it I'm going to show you today. So there's a whole pile of stuff that she's got, and fabulous stuff. Oh my god, so much stuff. I wish I could just bring the shipping container here and leave it as it is, but that's not practical either. Anyway, one of the things we did early on was we had a whole pile of velvet or velvet-like material that she had collected over the years, and a lot of it was in the form of garments. So this is a little girl's dress, for example. Now, she had started unpicking all of these, and I said, don't worry about it, we can work with what we've got. So I did up scrap bags with a heap of various different, coordinated as best I could, velvets. So once you've had a look at this, you want one of those, they'll be on the website. But I also want to show you that you can do these sorts of techniques from stuff that you can find in the op shops, out of your cupboards. They make great memory quilts exercises. So if you've got something and you want to sort of capture the essence of a person, you can get some of their clothing and turn it into different projects. So that's partly one of the reasons why I'm doing it this way, partly because I've got all this fabulous velvet that I'm far too lazy to unpick, but I still want to use most of it. So what I've done today is I've taken the velvet and I've just, where the seams are, I've just put a little bit of double-sided web, but I'll come back to that as well. So let's start at the beginning. So today's project is using some of Mum's stuff and embellishing a bag. Now, what I'm going to show you doesn't have to be a bag, can be a cushion, can be garment, can be a quilt, can be all sorts of things. Playmat for kids, all sorts of things. So I'm starting with the raw materials. So I have the Astra and Ann bag, and you'll know Jen is part of the Australian sewing community as well, and she designed these truly amazing bags. I just love them. And they're designed for you to basically personalise them and make them your own. So this one that I've got today is an Anna large tote bag, and it comes with everything you need. So the bag itself comes in 3 parts. So this is the main body of the bag, and you can see it's going to sit something like that, and it's got the pocket already sewn in, so you don't have to worry about doing that. It has the rivets with the hardware already in it. Excuse me. And then you've got the 2 side pieces. I'm not going to embellish the 2 side pieces, I'm just going to leave them as they are. But once everything's embellished, you basically take your pieces and you can have the seams on the outside to make it decorative, or you can have the seams on the inside so that you don't see them. and then you stitch the pieces together, and then you've got all your handles. I've managed already to lose some of the hardware. Oh, pins. I'd forgotten there were pins. I was looking for pins last night. All the hardware, that's a magnetic clasp to put it all together. So you've got everything you need other than the embellishment. So 2 leather handles, which are lovely, that you can then add to the finished bag. And of course you have instructions. So over the next 3 sessions I'm going to embellish this bag with some of Mum's velvet clothes. So pop that aside for now. Excuse me. So I know that I want to embellish the surface of the bag, and the single thing I have to do is work out how far down the sides are going to go before I start to go into my base. So I know that I've got pretty much all of that space. I'm going to work to about there with my embellishment. So with the pieces coming separately, you can put it all through the sewing machine. It's not like you have to work with a 3D object. So I'm going to use the velvets to create some flowers, and I'm going to embellish about that much of the bag on both sides. Preparing the velvet, I haven't done very much. As I said, I'm far too lazy to unpick all the bits, and some of the bags have everything unpicked and some of the bags have some that are actual garments like this. So I'm just going to work with what I've got. So there's quite a lot of velvet here, and if I come up to a point where I want to use something that's been part of a seam, I'll just give it a bit of a tug and pull the stitching out and straighten it out and give it an iron. So what I've done so far today is I have ironed double-sided web onto the back of these velvets. Now, a couple of things. If you've not used a double-sided web before, there's a whole pile of brands out there, and I'm not going to use a specific brand because it does my head in when people say I'm using such and such a brand, and they leave you with the perception that only that brand will do the job, which is fundamentally not the truth. There's many ways to skin all the cats, so many brands of double-sided web. What you're fundamentally looking for, if you've not used this for applique before, is it's a sheet of glue on a piece of paper, and they're normally ironed together, but I did pull this apart so I could show you the 2 elements. Now when they come ironed when they come on the roll or the sheet, you buy them and the glue is attached to the paper. When I'm using an applique shape, I take my paper side and draw from the pattern onto the paper side the shape that I'm going to cut out. You then cut it out roughly around the shape and then iron the glue side down onto the wrong side of the fabric you're using. So in this case, like that. Now, I haven't drawn shapes, but I'll explain why I haven't done that in a second. So once you've got your shape ironed onto the wrong side of your fabric, you cut it out exactly on the line, and then you've got all your elements. So that's for those of you that have not used it before. Right, so I have put my double-sided web onto my velvets or velvet-like fabrics. A lot of people are hesitant about using fabrics like this because they slip, they slide, they might fray. There's a whole range of reasons why people are hesitant to use anything that's not cotton. And I'm trying to get that, I'm trying to break that perception down a bit. So what I want to be able to show you is that once you've stabilised it, and in this case stabilised it with a double-sided web, it behaves exactly the same as a cotton once you start to work with it. But instead of a cotton, which is quite matte, you get this glorious texture and all the light catching elements and the dimensional effect. So I'm going to encourage you to try and experiment with different textures throughout most of my sessions. Now the reason I haven't traced these ones is because, again, I'm being quite lazy, and I'm going to use a cutting machine to cut out the shapes. So again, multiple companies, lots of options, no one single right way. Mine is a Sizzix Big Shot, and I use this shape a lot. So I've already taken a little bit of the red, and I've cut my shapes out on my machine. Now I do have space for more flowers on that piece, and I'll go back and I'll get more shortly. But that gives me these little pieces that I've already cut. So when I come to the point where I'm preparing this, I'm going to take the paper off the back of my double-sided web, and the glue's there, and then when I iron it onto my bag, I'm going to have this glorious little floral element. Now it can be any shape, any size, whatever you want. I'm just doing flowers because that tends to be what I do. So I'm going to go and cut all of the shapes. I wanted to show you the unfinished, uncut bits first, and then I'll come back and show you how I've laid this all out and the design that I've put in place. So I'll come back to you shortly. Okay, so I've gone off and I have done my cutting. I've used my Sizzix machine, as I said. I'm a bit lazy, very, very lazy. But cutting them out by hand is no big deal either. I could just as easily have traced the flowers, cut them out by hand and done the same thing. I've now done I've got to go back and do that one again. I've now appliqued, I have now ironed my shapes onto what will be the front of my bag, and it doesn't look that much because obviously you need the stitching. Now a couple of things, I did a terrible job of cutting because I was again being lazy and trying to do too much all in one go. So I've actually got two flowers where I didn't line them up properly, so I'm not going to waste those. I'm just going to put them on the edges, and then when I come through and finish my edges off, they'll either be folded inside the bag, but I'm probably actually going to do a binding around the outside to decorate. So those raw edges will all get caught, and it doesn't matter that I've cut half a flower. So you can always work around that, and again, really use your scraps, use stuff that you've got lying around the house. So that's going to be my front when I finish, and just a little bit of flowers, just 3 flowers. Again, one of them I cut badly, so I've tucked it underneath the bigger blue flower, and they are ready for stitching. Now, when I do applique pieces, I do them on machine, and a lot of people ask me about this when they look at my pieces, because when we're taught applique, we're taught to do a blanket stitch by hand. Okay, that's what we're taught. And that works beautifully for a particular style of quilt. Many of us will start out on quite large pieces of applique. They often have a country sort of theme, or they did when I was first learning to quilt. And the blanket stitch by machine or by hand suits that aesthetic well. A blanket stitch does not suit my aesthetic. I don't like it on a lot of things. There are things I put it on, I can do a blanket stitch. It's just when I'm doing things like this that have got a slightly more elegant finish, I don't want a blanket stitch on it. So I do a very fine straight stitch on my machine around the edges of the pieces. People ask me whether it's going to fray. No, it won't. People ask me whether it's going to be stable. Yes, it is. I've got the stabilization on the glue that's on the back of the flowers. So I have ironed a very comprehensive solid piece of glue onto the back of these flowers, which is going to hold all the fibres intact. It doesn't stop it being soft and easy to manipulate. It doesn't change the hand, but it's a fairly good blob of glue on the back there that's holding all those fibres together. And then what I do when I'm stitching is I'm just stabilising that stabilizer, if that makes any sense. I'm just making it a little bit stronger and giving it a bit of strength. So the strength is not actually coming so much from the stitching. That's a secondary insurance policy almost. The strength's coming from the glue that's behind there. It's holding all those fibres together in one piece. And then when I stitch it, it's going to just bond the edges and mean that it's not going to come off the surface. So the double-sided web, if I can say this all a bit more professionally, the double-sided web is what stabilises the fabric and the fibre and holds the piece together and stops the fraying. The stitching simply reinforces that and attaches it to the surface upon which you're putting it. So it won't come off. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Anyway, I'm not going to do much more in this video. This was all about the introductory part and getting the applique done. In the next video, which I think is Sunday the 18th, I need to double check that Sunday is in fact the 18th, I will be back and I'll be doing some machine stitching to hold my pieces down and some hand stitching to be decorative on the piece. And then a couple of days after that, whenever my third session is due, I'm going to show you how I make the binding and how I put the whole piece together. So I hope you're interested in this project. I hope I motivate you to go out and go to the op shops or see what you've got available in the cupboard that you can cut up and use as really interesting texture. And if you want one of Mum's bags or any of Mum's fabrics, please take some of Mum's fabrics. Any of Mum's fabrics, they're all on the website. Well, some of them are on the website. The bags are on the website. And I will talk to you again soon when we move on to the next stage of this project. Keep warm, keep safe if you're in Sydney and everywhere else, and I'll talk to you soon.